Welcome, friends of Middle-earth, to a journey into shadows seldom explored. You know the fires of Mount Doom, the eye of Sauron, and the bitter struggle of Frodo and Sam. But beyond the tales sung by bards and scribes lies a hidden history, an untold saga of silent wars and secret battles fought deep within the blackened heart of Mordor. Before the War of the Ring truly began, unseen conflicts raged, clashes that shaped the fate of the Third Age, long before Frodo ever set foot on that cursed land. Today we dive into the veiled corners of Tolkien's legendarium, uncovering the covert strife that smoldered beneath the shadow's gaze. These were not battles of armies in shining mail, but of spies, sabotage, and silent resistance. A struggle for the soul of Middle-earth, fought in the darkest places, unknown to most, but pivotal in the grand design of history. Let us begin with the gathering darkness after the fall of Númenor. In 3320 of the Second Age, Sauron, once again taking shape after his defeat in the downfall of Númenor, fortified Barad-dûr in the land of Mordor, which became his fortress of malice. Yet not all who dwelt in the shadow of his power were willing servants. Even as he forged the One Ring in 1600 of the Second Age, silent dissent lingered, hidden even from the Dark Lord himself. Some remnants of Númenorian blood, the Black Númenorians, settled near the edges of his domain, caught between loyalty and fear. Their secret grudges, forged by Sauron's betrayal of their ancestors, simmered for centuries, though none dared challenge his dominion openly. As the Third Age dawned, the memory of Númenor's wrath faded, but resistance flickered anew in unexpected forms. After the fall of Sauron's physical form in 3434 of the Second Age during the last alliance of elves and men, Mordor lay silent for over a millennium. Yet evil never sleeps. In c. 1050 of the Third Age, the shadow crept back to the fortress of Dol Guldur in southern Mirkwood. It was there, as noted in Unfinished Tales, that the wise began to suspect that Sauron himself had returned in secret. But Sauron's return to Mordor in 1980 of the Third Age was not uncontested. Before his open declaration in 2951, quiet battles raged behind the Black Gate. The Dunedain, descendants of the Númenorians, maintained vigilant watch from Gondor's ruined strongholds of Minas Ithil, later twisted into Minas Morgul, by the Witch King of Angmar. It was in these twilight years that Gondorian rangers ventured into the shadowed valleys of Mordor's borderlands, gathering intelligence and disrupting the rising power of Sauron's servants. Their efforts were quiet, unsung, and perilous. By 2002 of the Third Age, when Minas Ithil fell into the hands of the Nazgûl, the stage for the War of the Ring was set. Yet even then, beneath the grim peaks of Ephel Duath, silent hands worked against the shadow. The Rangers of Ithilien, though driven from their city, conducted daring incursions into the very edges of Mordor, cutting off supply lines, gathering whispers of dark movements, and seeking to disrupt Sauron's slow resurgence. These secret battles were not fought with grand armies, but with subtlety and sacrifice, small strokes that slowed the inevitable. But what of the darkness within Mordor itself? Sauron's dominion was vast and terrible, yet even in the heart of shadow, not all were loyal. Within the forges of Mount Doom and the dark halls of Barad-dûr, betrayal simmered like the molten fires below. As Sauron rebuilt his strength after his return in 2942 of the Third Age, secret discontent stirred among his own servants, particularly among the orcs, whose hatred for their master was rivaled only by their fear of him. The orcs of Mordor were no unified force of loyal subjects. They were a rabble of tribes and factions, each with its own brutal ambitions. The Morgul orcs, bred and twisted by the Witch King himself, despised the Uruks of Barad-dûr, who had been favored by Sauron for their size and strength. In the years before the War of the Ring, These tensions erupted into savage skirmishes within the darkened valleys of Mordor. Small-scale rebellions were ruthlessly crushed, yet they weakened Sauron's forces from within, an internal rot hidden beneath the iron facade of his armies. In the east, along the shadowed border where Mordor met Rhûn, another hidden struggle brewed. The Easterlings, men long corrupted by Sauron's promises, were not immune to the whispers of dissent. As early as 3000 of the Third Age, while Sauron's eye turned toward Gondor, internal strife among these tribes led to silent uprisings against his puppet leaders. Some Easterling warlords sought to break free from the yoke of Sauron's domination, only to vanish into the mists of the Black Land, never to be seen again. Yet perhaps the most secret of all battles in Mordor's depths was fought by those not of orc-kind or men, but by the Nazgûl themselves. Bound utterly to Sauron's will through the rings of power, they were his most faithful servants. Or so it seemed. In Morgoth's ring there are subtle hints of the enduring will of some of these ancient kings. Though enslaved by the power of the One Ring, fragments of their human ambition flickered in the shadows of their wraith forms. Could it be that, in the deep silence of their enslavement, they harbored thoughts of rebellion? A vain hope, perhaps. But in Tolkien's world, where pity and small choices hold immense power, such hidden struggles cannot be dismissed entirely. While these battles were fought in silence, another shadow crept into Mordor from the west, Gollum, the pitiful wretch ensnared by the lure of the One Ring. His capture by Sauron's servants in 3017 of the Third Age was no mere coincidence. In his madness, Gollum became a reluctant agent of disruption within Mordor, leading Sauron's forces on a fruitless chase into the Mountains of Shadow. His movements stirred confusion, forcing Sauron to divert his gaze, if only briefly, giving the free peoples of Middle-earth precious moments to prepare. These secret conflicts within Mordor were the cracks in the Dark Lord's fortress, small and seemingly insignificant, but history has often turned on the slightest of fractures. As the great storm of war loomed ever closer, these hidden struggles weakened Sauron's foundation in ways even the wise could scarcely imagine. In the waning years of the Third Age, Gondor's vigilance became a quiet blade against Sauron's shadow. Though Minas Ithil had fallen and become Minas Morgul in 2002 of the Third Age, the stewards of Gondor did not forget their ancient duty. From the forests of Ithilien, the Rangers, men of Númenórean descent, carried out covert missions that few would ever hear of. These warriors, led by captains like Faramir in later years, became phantoms in the woods, striking swiftly and disappearing like mist before the Dark Lord's wrath could reach them. Their primary goal was not open battle but disruption. The supply lines feeding Mordor's war machine were often severed in the dead of night. Small patrols of rangers would descend upon Easterling caravans bearing arms and provisions for Sauron's forces, burning supplies and leaving behind no trace of their passage. Such strikes forced Sauron's servants to increase their guard within Mordor itself, spreading his forces thinner than he would have wished before the inevitable war. Beyond these daring raids, the rangers gathered intelligence of immense value. They observed the movement of orc legions, noted the arrival of reinforcements from the east and south, and tracked the dark stirrings in Minas Morgul. Every scrap of knowledge was a blow against Sauron's plans, shared in secret with Gondor's leaders. This information would later prove vital during the War of the Ring, guiding the decisions of Denethor and eventually Aragorn. Yet, few knew the true cost of this vigilance, paid in silence and blood. But even Gondor was not alone in this secret war. The dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale, though distant from Mordor's immediate reach, played their part by resisting Sauron's agents. As noted in the War of the Jewels, Sauron's influence extended far beyond the Black Land, and his servants sought alliances with various peoples to tighten their master's grip on Middle-earth. Yet, resistance thrived in unexpected places. Traders from Dale turned spies, feeding false information to Sauron's emissaries, while dwarven craftsmen subtly undermined trade goods destined for the Dark Lord's allies. Meanwhile, in the desolate highlands of Mordor itself, a resistance of a different kind was growing. one of sheer survival. The Druidain, ancient men of forgotten lineage, were known to haunt the rugged lands far from Sauron's gaze. Mysterious and secretive, their knowledge of the wilds made them invisible to Sauron's eyes. While they were not actively at war with him, their mere survival and secrecy represented defiance. It is said that some among them, using their deep understanding of nature, sabotaged the Dark Lord's plans in ways too subtle for his servants to comprehend. And then there was the silent vigilance of the Istari. Chief among them was Gandalf, who, long before the Fellowship's formation, watched Sauron's resurgence with quiet dread. As recorded in Unfinished Tales, Gandalf's journey into Dol Guldur in 2850 of the Third Age revealed the true identity of the necromancer, Sauron himself. Though not within Mordor's borders, this revelation ignited a secret war of information, setting into motion events that would eventually culminate in the White Council's assault on Dol Guldur in 2941. Every whisper Gandalf uncovered in the east weakened the Dark Lord's growing influence. The secret battles in Mordor were not of grand armies clashing in open fields, but of shadows against shadows, silent rebellions, forgotten sacrifices, and the courage of those who fought in obscurity. These unseen conflicts weakened Sauron in ways he never perceived, setting the stage for his ultimate downfall. Before the fires of Mount Doom could be quenched, it was these hidden struggles that loosened the Dark Lord's grip, turning fate against him in the final hour. Sauron's downfall did not begin with armies at his gates, but with his own overconfidence, his belief in absolute control. In his mind, every corner of Mordor was accounted for, every servant bent entirely to his will. Yet it was precisely this arrogance that blinded him to the creeping fractures within his dominion. The secret battles waged in the shadows, though small in scale, sowed doubt, disorder, and weakness in his grand designs. Imperfections the Dark Lord refused to acknowledge. One of Sauron's greatest miscalculations was his underestimation of Gollum. Though the pitiful creature was broken by centuries of obsession and torment, his capture in 3017 of the Third Age introduced a wild element Sauron could not predict. When Gollum was tortured and released, whether intentionally or through his own cunning, he carried knowledge that would eventually doom the Dark Lord: the location of the One Ring's bearer. Yet, Gollum's treachery did not end with revealing secrets under duress. His escape and subsequent journey into Mordor's outskirts stirred unforeseen consequences. His presence set into motion a chain of events that Sauron, in all his foresight, failed to anticipate. Moreover, the Dark Lord's trust in his commanders, especially the Nazgul, proved to be a fragile foundation. Though utterly bound to the One Ring, the Wraith's effectiveness was not absolute. Their fearsome presence inspired terror, but even terror has its limits. In the War of the Ring, Tolkien hints at the growing hesitation among the Nazgul when the winds of fate began to shift. Subtle failures in their pursuit of the ring, particularly their inability to capture Frodo at Weathertop or intercept him on the borders of Mordor, were not mere accidents, but echoes of Sauron's overreach and miscalculation. Another of Sauron's blind spots lay in his assumption of Mordor's impregnability. The Eifel Duath Mountains and the Black Gate seemed impenetrable, but Sauron did not account for the ingenuity of his enemies. The hidden paths, such as Cirith Ungol, guarded by the monstrous Ki Lobo, were overlooked as true vulnerabilities. Frodo and Sam's perilous journey through this darkened pass in 3019 of the Third Age would ultimately allow them to bypass Sauron's vast armies entirely, slipping unseen into the heart of his realm. It was a flaw born of arrogance. Sauron believed that no enemy would dare infiltrate his lands with such boldness, especially not through the lair of an ancient terror. Beyond physical barriers, Sauron's greatest failure was underestimating the power of mercy and resilience. He could not comprehend the significance of Samwise Gamgee's loyalty, nor could he foresee that the smallest, most unassuming beings would carry the greatest burdens. As the secret battles within Mordor weakened his control, the true blow came not from armies, but from compassion. bravery and sacrifice, virtues beyond his understanding. It was these forces, born of hidden struggles and quiet defiance, that allowed Frodo to reach Mount Doom and fulfill the most perilous quest in the history of Middle-earth. When Sauron's gaze was finally turned inward as Aragorn led the armies of the West to the Black Gate in 3019 of the Third Age, it was already too late. The secret battles, those waged by Gondorian rangers, the whispers of the Druidine, Gollum's unforeseen betrayal, and the hidden mercy of the Fellowship, had frayed the edges of Sauron's dominion. The Dark Lord's eye was fixed upon the wrong threat, blinded by pride and a hunger for domination so consuming that he failed to recognize the silent storm rising within his own land. And so, with the destruction of the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom, Sauron's vast empire crumbled, not through overwhelming force, but by the accumulation of hidden struggles and quiet resistance. These secret battles, though unsung by many, were just as vital as any great war fought upon the fields of Gondor or Rohan. They were the unseen threads woven into the tapestry of fate, threads that, when pulled, unraveled the mightiest shadow Middle-earth had ever known. The fall of Sauron was not merely the collapse of a tyrant, but the unraveling of an entire age of darkness, and the secret battles fought within Mordor's shadows were the quiet architects of his demise. These unseen struggles, woven into the vast history of Middle-earth, left scars deeper than those carved by swords or fire. They remind us that even the smallest acts of resistance, often unnoticed, often unheralded, can shape the fate of the world. In the aftermath of Sauron's destruction, the lands of Mordor were left broken and desolate, yet free from the suffocating grip of shadow for the first time in centuries. The Rangers of Ithilien, long guardians of Gondor's forgotten borders, were among the first to reclaim the wilds. Under the stewardship of Faramir, they began the healing of a land long drowned in despair, transforming Ithilien from a frontier of war into a garden of peace. The bravery of these rangers, forged in the secret wars waged within the shadow of Mordor, had not been in vain. Beyond Gondor, the ripples of these hidden battles spread far. In the east, the chains of Sauron's dominion shattered, granting the Easterlings and Haradrim a chance to reclaim their destinies, free from the Shadow's corruption. Though their lands bore the weight of generations under Sauron's influence, the defeat of the Dark Lord allowed the possibility of renewal, a second chance for cultures manipulated by fear and false promises. The resistance among some of their leaders, subtle and stifled as it was, now had space to flourish. Even in distant lands, the echoes of these secret struggles endured. The dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale, who had resisted Sauron's influence through quiet defiance and unwavering alliances, found their strength renewed in the Fourth Age. Trade flourished, alliances deepened, and the shadow that had threatened to consume the Free Peoples began to fade into legend. Their perseverance had been a light in darkened times, a testament to unity in the face of silent corruption. Yet the most profound legacy of these hidden conflicts lies not in lands reclaimed or kings crowned, but in the lesson they left behind, a truth woven through every corner of Tolkien's legendarium. Power unchecked breeds arrogance, and arrogance blinds even the mightiest to the smallest of threats. Sauron, in all his foresight, could not imagine defeat through such humble means. A hobbit's resilience, a ranger's vigilance, or a creature's frail betrayal. The silent wars fought within Mordor's walls remind us that true strength often lies in humility, persistence, and the courage to resist, even when no songs will be sung of those battles. In the end, the greatest victories are not always won on open fields, but in the unseen moments of defiance that shape the course of history. The secret battles in Mordor before the War of the Ring were not forged by grand armies or mighty kings, but by the unsung heroes who stood against the shadow in silence and sacrifice. Their story is not one of glory, but of quiet, steadfast courage, the kind that holds the darkness at bay when all hope seems lost. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the hidden heart of Middle-earth's history. If this glimpse into the shadows of Mordor stirred your love for Tolkien's vast legendarium, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts. What other forgotten tales would you like to see brought into the light? Until next time, Namari, farewell, and may the stars shine upon your path.